Welcome to another episode of the Sefer Chatter podcast, and I'm Nachi Weinstein. This episode is sponsored by Mosaica Press. Check out their many new titles at your local Judaica store or mosaicapress.com, especially Lessons from Targum Onkleos, a brand new 2-volume set that teaches the fundamental yesodis of Onkelos and will enhance every reader's understanding and appreciation for Onkelos. And you can also find a link to that in the show's notes below. Being that crowdfunding campaigns for Svarim are now a thing, this episode is also sponsored by a project to reprint the shiurim of the Mikdash David, Rav David Rappaport Zatzal, Rosh Hashiva in Baranovich, with Rav Elchanan Wasserman. Rav David was sent to Siberia by the communists and died in 1941 without any descendants. His magnum opus Mikdash David on Zroim, Tyrus, and Kodshim, together with his notes on Charles Jewish Kveger Tzemach David, was published by Machon HaMa'or a number of years ago. But now this project is looking to republish and redo all his shiurim, some of which have been previously published on Baba Basra, on one volume, and a volume on Psachim and Chulin. These will now be published together with extra material for manuscripts and journals, and it will be done in a massive 3-volume set. If anyone has any notebooks or writings of his shiurim, as well as any knowledge of Torah published in various journals, I know the project did find some material that was in the Torah Vidas, Hamasifta journals, and others, but if you know of anything, they're in the final stages now, and they're looking for additional material, please email them, mikdashdavidshiurim@gmail.com, which is mikdashdavidshiurim@gmail.com. And that information, that email account is in the show's notes below, and they're really looking for any information as they try to finish up. Additionally, you can support this project through the link below. There's a link to a Chesed Fund page where they are looking to collect the final amounts of money that are needed for this project. There's some more information there. You can see a rendering of the 3 volumes and some of the manuscripts that they have and some other information there. And again, you can email them as well if you are interested in finding out more information. To sponsor an episode or support the podcast, please email me at svarimchatter@gmail.com or see the links and information in the show's notes. Please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform, and enjoy the episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Svarim Chatter podcast. In this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be joined once again by Rav Aron Lopiansky, who is Rosh Hashiva of Yeshiva of Greater Washington, Tiferes Gedalia. I also want to say that this episode is being sponsored anonymously in honor of Rav Aron Lopiansky, Rav Leo Reingold, and Yeshiva of Greater Washington. So thank you, Rav Aron, for joining me once again.
Thank you. Thank you for making time.
Okay, so we're going to be discussing, I think I left this part out, the new Sefer that you just compiled and edited and published called Mefayresh V'Soyim Sechel. On our last episode on the Nachlas Yosef, we teased this. We discussed a little bit at the end. We mentioned this, but this is now out and available. By the time this podcast we posted will be available in the stores for sale. So let's talk about this. This Sefer it's a collection of different Gedalim and Svarim. You can talk about on Taamim, Trop, right, and on Onkelos. So how did this come to be? How did this Sefer come to be?
So the history, the Gilgulim are, in Yeshiva we have a Seder in the morning, Shabbos, after davening by Kiddush. We've been doing the Yesod Torah. That's how the Yesod Torah got started, Rishonim. And then there was 2 more things that I felt were needed. Just people should be aware. I just felt there was a lack of awareness. One is, we're supposed to do Taamei HaMikra Targum. It's bad enough that most people don't really know Lashon Targum, but they don't even understand what the Chiddush is of Targum. And then the Taamei HaMikra, I was bothered a lot of times. Israelis, when they read in the Torah, I've lived in Israel for 25 years, they have a natural sense of how to phrase a pasuk, how to sort of the cadence of the pasuk and its natural pauses. I found that a lot of Americans were clueless. So even if they knew the Taamim, the Taamim was seen as something as musical, but not really understanding time what they are. And I felt that by seeing what difference it makes in understanding the pasuk, it would make people more sensitive. So we do 5 minutes each, and I compiled over the years with things that I found it shot him in the pasuk that the Taamim enlighten you, and places where the Targum makes significant changes, and we do 2 or 3 each every Shabbos, and I found, Baruch Hashem, people become a lot more sensitive to understanding it.
Okay, so you have 2 parts. Each parsha has 2 parts. The first part's on the Taamim in the Sefer. Each part's on Taamim, and then it's on Onkelos. So I want to start with Taamim. And first of all, if you could just explain the name of the Sefer, the Farish V'Sayim Sechel is a pasuk, and what that has the integral part here. Where does that come in?
So the Gemara says, the Megillah, it says that by Nehemiah, by Yikru b'Sefer b'Torah Salokim, Mefurish b'Sum Seichel v'Yivinu HaMikra. So 3 things. They learned the Torah. It was Mefurish and Sum Seichel. Soim Seichel, I guess if you could say it more correctly. So Chazal say Mefurish is a Targum, v'Sum Seichel ela Psukim. V'Yivinu HaMikra ela Piski Taamim v'Amle ela Mesiris. So the Pshat over here is the pasuk is telling you that he read them the Torah plus the Targum plus the Taamim and the Piskei Mikros, so which is sort of part of the Taamim. That's where the name comes from. I guess I was looking for a name that would include both together, and that we hit on that pasuk.
Right. Okay. So let's talk about the Taamei HaMikra. They're called Taamei HaMikra. The Taamim, I think, in everyday parlance, it's Trop, but everyone knows it as the Trop. That's what that, where does that come? Where is it? Where are the names? Let's start with the names. Taamei HaMikra, Taamim, Trop.
It's not like time, and this is a word that I think a lot of people don't understand. In a lot of Rishonim, Even Ezra, Ramban, and Chumash, you'll find a lot of times the phrase "v'ta'amo," which has been wrongly translated many times as the reason. That's not. Vitamo means what exactly is the intention? What exactly do you mean by that? Let's give an example. I can take a secular example. If I say everyone has to come with white shirts on Sunday, what exactly are we talking about? It's do they have to come with shirts? They have to come with white shirts. There's a lot missing if you don't know exactly how to phrase it. And when you have when the timing of the means, how do I read this? What's the exact intonation? Like the famous example, somebody says, did you take the car last night? Or did you take the car last night? That means 2 separate things. And we understand instinctively. Did you take the car last night it seems to have been an okay thing. And the question is, did you take the car last night? Where I say, did you take the car, means someone stole the car, and were you the one? All I did was I emphasized one word out of proportion, and it took on a different meaning. So just like I take the same piece of meat, I can cook it with salt and pepper, and I can cook it with honey and sweetener, and it has a different taste to it. It's a piece of meat, but its taste different. But tamo means the exact understanding, the exact flavor of the word. Right.
So then we have different types of taamim, as everyone is probably familiar. I mean, some learn. We can also discuss how some of us learned to do it for bar mitzvah, and some people never, unfortunately, learn how to do it. They're not familiar with it. They just hear it by laning, and they're just not familiar at all with it. I don't know if you have to say anything about that, just as an aside, like that people today don't know Taamei HaMikra. They don't even know how to read it or what it means.
Well, part of it is also they don't understand what is. You don't have to know every little. What's the right word for it? Every little niggin. What's more important, first and foremost, taamim are a way of breaking up the pasuk. Punctuation, minimal punctuation, which is the difference in the meaning of a pasuk. So the putting in the comma and the period in the right place is the beginning of giving it its true meaning. There's a famous, there's a famous thing, in English, commas save lives. I had my grandmother for dinner last night. Depending on where you put the comma on that, you're either a cannibal or a wonderful grandson. Did I have my grandmother for dinner and have last night, or did I have my grandmother for dinner last night? It makes the world of difference where you phrase it. So Taamim are a system of telling us how to structure the gaps in the pasuk, and that will change the meaning many times. It will certainly give the subtleness. That's the first of, and when you hear someone laying and they don't know how to put it together, if you're listening, it sounds painful because what they're saying is that sometimes absurd, sometimes wrong, and sometimes just grating.
Right. They really the time. If you don't read the time, it's not.
You don't get time. Then you don't have the meaning clear. And a lot of times, if you lane it well, you understand. For instance, a parenthetical remark. If you break before a parenthetical remark, you're giving it its full understanding. If you read it together, you don't have that understanding. And this is what Taamim are first and foremost. They give us the basic understanding in a pasuk.
Right. So let's talk about Taamim. Where do they come from?
So there is a machlokus in the Gemara. So let's go slowly. They obviously, when they came down from Sinai and they taught us the Torah, a lot of psukim could mean different things depending on where you stop and where you start. It is a machlokus in the Gemara about whether Piskei Taamim are d'oraisa or not. Tomorrow in the there are many shittas that hold even if you don't say all the time of d'oraisa, but a certain safe pasuk is d'oraisa, because the halacha is called Piskei Pasuk Moshe Rabbeinu, and we can't be mafsik. So if we don't know which places are the psukim, then we're clueless. So at least the pasuk, because it becomes meaningless. Imagine reading a paragraph. If you have a Sefer Torah in front of you and you're reading a paragraph without pausing, it has no meaning. So and depending on where you cut the psukim, it can have very different meanings. So at least that seems to be many shittas is a d'oraisa, or it may be part of the Torah Shabbat Peh in the sense of mipi ish. So there is machlokes in Gemara, and the assumption is pasuk the Gemara darshans that Ezra sat and taught them this. So it's definitely the basic safe pasuk seems to be the basic outline seems to be Misinai. After that, the nuance part that seems to be possibly later Kufis, Ezra, Nehemiah, Ashkenaz Agdola. I mean, it's certainly the fact that the Gemara darshans is pasuk by Ezra and doesn't have a pasuk saying, it doesn't have a problem saying this Taamei HaMikra. Obviously, it minimally is from that kufa.
So when someone learns the Taamim, you're learning the Trop, you're learning how to lane. Is that Limud HaTorah? That's really a connected thing.
Right. So that's really more connected. It would be something where you don't obviously learn it. Let's put it this way. My feeling is that if you have a bar mitzvah teacher teaching a kid, and that's it, that's not Limud HaTorah. But if you have a pasuk and you're giving it to the person with Taamim, you're giving him some meaning in the pasuk. And so if you're teaching him how to read the pasuk with a tam, besides the fact you're reading the pasuk, there's obviously some sort of giving over of what the pasuk means.
Right. And as you mentioned the names, we have Kadmo, Azar, Kamurach, Ravi, etc. All the names. Where do the names come from? Is the names something that's later?
So we don't have. So let's go slow. We don't have any records of it before the Zohar HaKadosh. The Zohar HaKadosh is the first one that actually mentions many of the names. Some of the names, Tipcha and Tircha, there are some of the names are different in different kufis. So there's no hard and fast idea that the names are as common as that. The first one talks about it is really the Zohar in different parts. And there are 2 or 3 Taamim that different places. Rashi will some of the time will have a different name for it. So the earliest we can date that to is the Tkufa of the Zohar HaKadosh.
So the names, though, so therefore in the Sefer there are sometimes people that Svarim that darshan the names about the names in a shtickle Torah. You don't do that in the Sefer, right?
No, well, the Sefer is a likut from other Sefarim. Those drushes I understood as being a getter of remez. Moshe Zohar Kaddish does use it in a sense where it sounds like it's starting it, but my understanding is it's a getter of remez, not pshat, and I felt that would be counterproductive because we're trying to understand its basic point. Remez is a limitless field. There's a tremendous amount of remezim. I stuck to things where the passing of the pasuk gives us different pshatim.
So stylistically in the Sefer, you're saying it's mainly very pshat focused.
Very pshat focused, exact pshat. A lot of it, what's fascinating is what I found is, especially in halacha, and we'll see maybe one example in this week's parasha. In halacha, you have sometimes the drasha of Chazal in the pasuk is actually based on the Taamim we have. And you see clearly they read it in a certain way and the drasha is a far stronger because one sees where the Taamim are.
Right.
I can give you an example if you would like.
Ahead.
So in this week's parsha, it says you should make the shnei chatzosos kesef miksha tasoisam, and you should make it miksha. Now the arrangement is sort of the pashup pshat obviously is you make 2 chatzosos of kesef, and it should be one chunk, like miksha achas, like the menorah and so on. The Sefer has a different drush on it, and he says kesef miksha, which means it has to be hard silver, as opposed to a sort of running silver, which people used to paint on the house. They had like a silver paint. I know exactly how they did it. So this had to be made of hard metallic silver as opposed to running silver. So Tefer Sian, it's a Talmud of Maril Diskin, or Mitzin Yadlev is a famous darshan. He said Chazal had the remez in the pasuk because miksha tasa osam, one would have expected to be run together. It's one phrase, but the word miksha has a tip on it, which sort of sets it aside. So the pasuk is make 2 chatzosos of kesef miksha tasa osam. So it doesn't say kesef miksha. It's the miksha is a word that stands alone, and therefore Chazal felt it could be darshan both on the taseh, on the process, and on the kesef, and that's where Chazal had their sense of it, because the word miksha was a standalone word according to the Taamim, and not go together with the kesef tasoisam, with miksha tasoisam. Therefore, we could use the word miksha on both sides. The halach is you certainly have to process it as miksha. It also describes the kesef.
Now, by the way, you mentioned there's a tibcha on a mixture. Can you explain what that means? How that looks like?
I think I jumped the gun, and you're very right. So the Taamim that we have are a system of different degrees of separation, meaning something like a safe pasuk, which is an absolute stop, and an asnachta, which is a very strong stop. So you have, they're called Keser and Malachim, Mishnah Melech. You have 3 or more levels of stop. So when you're reading the pasuk, the strongest stop is obviously safe pasuk. The snachta should be the next strong stop, Zakef Kattans, and so on. And then there are 9 Taamim that are misharsim, which means they tell you to join it with the next word. So a pasuk consists of, if you stand back, it consists of a hard stop at the end, a strong stop in the middle, more minor stops at the quarter mark, and so on. Now, if the pasuk is normal pasuk, that's pretty much what it's going to look like. You will find many times when it's not proportional, and that's a giveaway that obviously it's the pasuk is meant to be understood a little differently than you would instinctively understand it. So you have the tipcha, for instance, is a mafsik, quite a strong mafsik, and therefore it's standalone. You don't read it miksha tasoisam, you read it miksha tasoisam. There's that tiny gap which allows for miksha to be a standalone, and Chazal could understand it as also relating to the half a pasuk before.
Now, listeners are familiar. If you open up a chumash, any chumash has it's all those different lines and squiggly things on top and the bottom, all the different right. Usually in the front of a chumash, I think usually it has the names. Usually can explain to someone all the names and what each one looks like.
Right.
I mean, in general, what's your? I'm curious. Two things. Just in general, we can talk more about the specific Taamim and more examples. But like, what's your opinion? Like, should everyone really learn this? Should everyone really know Taamim?
Know it to a minimal level, so that when you read a pasuk, let me take something that is not a pasuk, but that is horribly mangled because people don't have that sense. And I'm talking about Anim Zmiris, where the sweetest little kids in the shul stand up front. They sing Anim Zmiris beautifully. Now, most of Anim Zmiris is built in a certain way where the cadence follows the tune. But Tika Shir Rosh Beinecha, Kashir Ayusha Kabanecha means, so the kids sing it all with the same Tika Shiras Rosh Beinecha, Kasha Yusha Kabanecha. That's the, for those of you who've davened shul Modal Batish, that's the typical, for those who can remember, or that's no. Now, this tune and that cadence is right for most of it. But in this sentence, Tika Shir Rosh means, may the song of a poor man be precious in your eyes, Kashir Yushal Kabanecha, like the song that was sung on the Karbanis. When you sing it with that, Tika Shirs means, may the song be precious. Rosh Beinecha, the poor people in your face. Kashir Yushal Kabanecha. That is pretty. That's not exactly what you intend to say. So I'm not having that feel for the appropriate groupings. And this is one of the big problems in general, because Americans don't instinctively know the Hebrew, and you put in nigunim into the words. So forgetting about whether nigunim express the spirit of the words, but it mangles this sentence by running together words that should be separate and separating words that should be run together. So the general sense of Taamim, where you get a feel for how the meaning of a sentence is expressed by the rhythm and the different gaps, I think it's just it should be a basic understanding.
An example, I think we have mentioned this in the podcast a while back, that every Thursday morning at the end by the Shir Shel Yoim, the Chazan always says, you'll eat from a rock of honey. There's no, needs to be a stop. Mitzor, devash aspieka, but they just run through it.
That's a perfect example, and it is. And now the truth is, it's an unusual way of structuring a sentence, but it's poetic. It's Tillim. It's not prose, and that's the way it's done. But if a person doesn't have that feel, then he is. By the way, I just would like to make a comment. People don't understand something. There are two systems of Trop. There's a Trop for most Sfarim, and there is what's called Emes for Eov, Mishnah, and Tehillim. And people will see an Esnacht and Tehillim in all sorts of strange places. And Esnacht and Tehillim is not at all the same as the Esnachta in Chumash. It is a minor Trop. There's something called Olav Yored, which is the central, besides Seif Pasuk, is that central equivalent of Snachta. They just have a different system for these three Sfarim, no idea why, and therefore you can't. The squiggles don't mean the same. That's how the system works, and therefore people mess up there. They make that mistake. So there is something called the Taamim of Emes, of Mishneh Tillim, and they have their own set of what's the most important mafsik, lesser mafsik, and still lesser mafsik.
Right, the asnachta, this is hard, we're doing this audio visual, is like the arch with a little line going on top of it.
Usually in the middle of pasuk, and it has the strongest gap in the pasuk. And
Yeah, I think everyone seems to be familiar with the shalshelis. That's the one that everyone knows. The field of
Yes,
shalshelis. They have
yes.
everyone is familiar
Now
with.
there is now. Let me explain something. This is besides. So Taamim really have three functions. The most important function is the one we spoke about by far. That's the most important function. There are two more functions that I could like to mention. One is, and also this is a problem for Americans, the emphasis on the emphasis on the which part of the word. Words generally consist of more than one syllable. They consist 2 or 3 syllables. Where do you put the emphasis? Now, in English, most of the emphasis tends to be on the earlier part of the word. And I still remember the teachers drilling into our head, it's not syllable, it's syllable. That was like so it's usually on the first syllable. Guess what? In Lashon Kodesh, it's syllable. It is on the second half. And there's somebody who says, I've saying Kaddish, a very big, very, very chashuv person, but he has a Chassidish taste, a Chassidish knetch himself. He has come from Chassidish background. And Yiskadel, Yiskadesh, Shmei Rabbah, and it drives me up a wall because it's wrong. It has nothing to do with Chassidish, and this is one of the few places, the Havaras Faradit versus Havaras is, no one knows for sure. We make assumptions, but we don't, and each community has its own, and therefore it's appropriate to keep your own. The Chassidish having the E sound, the O sound, the Au sound of the Germans, those are things that you can guess and discuss, but where the emphasis, that's 100% clear. Open up the Chumash, and where the Tam is, by and large, in Lashon Kodesh, the Taamim are on the second part. It's Iskadel, Viskadesh, and so on. That's the right way to read it. So the Tam is on the part of it they're supposed to read, except when there's an exception, you notice it. So the Mashal, V'yasu b'nei Yisrael es haposach, the tipcha on posach is on the pay. It's not posach. When it's posach, it's posach. When it's a verb, it's posach. Here it's a noun and it's a comet, so it's posach. You're supposed to read it like v'yasu b'nei Yisrael, not ha-pesach, or it's ha-posach. And the reason is it's a strong, and Rashi, actually, this is a point Rashi makes in a few places where Rashi says Lamashal, it says Rochel ba'a imatzoin. Rashi comments that it's 2 psukim apart, 3. In one place, the emphasis is on the first vowel ba'a, and the second one, the emphasis is ba'a matzoin, or it's the other way around actually, ba'a and ba'a. The difference is one is present tense. One is past tense. One means Rachel is coming. As I'm talking, she is coming with the sheep. And that would be the emphasis on the second vowel. And then Ba'a, meaning she came with the sheep, there the emphasis is on the first vowel. It means 2 separate things. So the word, when people mangle the word Ba'a and it's substitute to one for the other, it's wrong. Now, halachically, we won't go back on that because we don't have that level of sensitivity, and the halach is in a place where people get things wrong, with the aleph and ayin and so on. We don't go back. But it means 2 separate things. Came and is coming is not the same word. It's similar, but not the same word. So Rashi. So a second importance is to notice where the tam is on the pasuk. And the word, I'm sorry, which letter they put the Bala Misor put it on the letter that you're supposed to emphasize. And then there's a third reason, this segues to the Shalshalas you're talking about, where it adds a certain level of Hadgasha. Shalshalas Vayemoen is a really strong word because, yes, he refused it's meant to emphasize it, a puzzle, and so on. So that is a sort of a musical highlighting. And Reb Shlomo Hirsch has in a few places where there's a pasuk with a lot of heavy trop being used to sort of emphasize how difficult it was to say it. A lot of stops. There is something about the tone of it that there used to be that gives over some of the meaning. That's a third Indian of the Taamim, less important than the first two, I would say.
So first of all, I'll try to find the link to just a list of all the Taamim so that any listener wants the link and see what we were talking about can see the Taamim, or like I said, it's in any Chumash, it should be in the front. So in general, this is something that's Americans. I think this has to do with like diktuk also, that just as Americans get used to the language, we're just kind of used to butchering Hebrew and mangling it, but especially the Taamim. I remember I only learned after my bar mitzvah, but I learned after from a klaf. But the good thing was my mother was like, no, you have to learn it. So I learned it. I'm able to learn as a backup and able to do Shnai Mikra. I learned the Trop at least. It's unfortunate that people don't learn the Trop and they never know it. I have friends say, oh, do you do Shnai Mikra or whatever? They're like, I don't know how to read. I have no idea how to learn. I don't know how to read the Trop. It's unfortunate. Even the basic, even just the basic ideas.
Right. My father's kind of bracha was an incredibly beautiful bakriya. Unfortunately, none of those genes got passed on to me. But my father was, and people know him, he used to learn in Bialstak Shul. He was the shamus for many years there. And the thing that people would tell me time and again, that's very meaningful, they would say, when your father learned the parsha, I knew exactly what the parsha meant. And when you hear somebody reading something well, it's sort of, I remember in Eretz Yisrael, I once heard, I don't know if this person was even from, but he was a known, I don't know what the right word is, not Arda, but he used to read Tanakh for maybe the radio, so I don't know, it was a long time ago. And when he would read a pasuk, your hair would stand on end because he just got it right. The pasuk walked off, and you see reading it right gives it tam, exactly like it's called.
Right. Now, I want to go back, though, as you were saying about how, like, Rachel, ba, different ways, past tense, future tense. So, really, are we able to even say a Pshat not according to the Taamim? Or that's just a drush?
So this is really, this is a fascinating, we do say, now, we do say Pshatim not like the time. There are, if you'll see in the Hakdama here, there's a Hakdam on Taamim and Hakdam on Onkelos. The Hakdam on Taamim was taken with their permission, with their kind permission, from the Mikropedia. Mikropedia is an encyclopedia Talmudis that they got around to realizing that it's grown from an encyclopedia to something enormous, and if somebody wants quick information, it's hard to get it. So they've made a sort of mini version of it without the bottom and just the main points. They have it, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 volumes, and they had one on Taamim, which they let us use, and I'm very grateful. And they bring over here how the Rishonim spoke about it and so on. There are Rishonim who write, never listen to Pirushim that's not like the Taamim, the Nezarites, others, but there are other places like that also, and you find it like that. It seems as if the Gemara says there are 5 psukim without hechreya. Taisa says, well, why don't you go to Taamim? It's either we lost. In other words, what they're saying is that the Masoras we have may not be correct. What they're saying is it's the machlokas in the Gemara is based on a machlokas in the Taamim. It seems yes, there are pshatim said not like the Taamim. And even by the Rishonim who write very strongly about it, sometimes they'll say, and they bring over here, you can look at it further. So it could be because we don't have that exact Masoros, it's kind of, we hope we preserved it well. So there's mokum to say that it may have been different, and that's why we're giving an alternative pshat, and so on. It could also be that the Taamim are a first pshat, and there are other ways to learn it that are also a getter of drush that are also permissible. I don't know. There's a lot of different discussion. Nothing that's definitive.
Now, what about the tune? We named the tune and the Taamim, like I said, less of this tune, but Torah has one, and Navi has another. Torah has a different tune.
So it's hard to tell. First of all, you also have to ask yourself the different communities. Sfardim, Teimanim. There's it's hard when they come over, when they talk about tunes, that this tune was based on Mikdash, and you ask yourself, Did the Teimanim not exist in the Beis HaMikdash? The Sfarim not exist? What about the other communities? I would say, but if you take 3 steps back, the general flow of the tune should be similar. In other words, are we getting the same sense of the pasuk or not? Are we getting the same emphasis, the same, the same hadgasha on certain parts? So I believe that it's hard to tell. They did not have recordings in those days, so not even podcasts. Believe it or not, there was a tkufa, pre-podcast tkufa. So I don't know of any, but I think in the general flow of the sentences is where the air should pick up similarities between everybody.
Okay, so now maybe you have some other examples from the Sefer. I want to mention that this before we get the Onkelos part, the Sefer is very nice. Each, before whatever pasuk that is a shtickle being brought on, it has the pasuk with the whole pasuk written out. Tells you where it is, which pasuk. Like this week we're recording Baloischa, Tes Beis has the pasuk with the Trop there, the Nekudas, then it brings and then it explains it, which is very nice. So I don't know if you have any other specific examples that you wanted to mention about Taamim.
Yeah, let's take one example. This is from a sefer called Limud HaMikra. Limud HaMikra is an extraordinary sefer written by a young man who lives in Lakewood. It's a Rav Gettinger. He put this out as a young person. He dared himself to come up with 4 pshatim on each, based on Taamim in each parsha. They're incredible. It's a small sefer. I believe you can still get it by the Machaber. I don't take a commission, but feel free to ask. The one in last week's parsha, his pshatim are usually al pi halacha and so on. They have they show out the sense of halacha. He says, it says mayim hamorim hameorim. That's the pasuk. It's mentioned a few times. In some places, there's a mafsik between mei hamorim hameorim. So, in other words, is it read depending the 2 or 3 psukim, depending on whether it's read? It could be read mei hamorim hameorim, or mei hamorim hameorim. In other words, which is bunched together? Mei hamorim hameorim, or mei hamorim hameorim. Now, he brings, it doesn't seem any reason, like, how is it supposed to go together? He brings 3 psukim with very different, with different hata'am in this. And he says something extremely miskabel al das. The morim hameorim, these are the bitter waters that curse, can have 2 meanings. They are accursed. These are bitter waters because they carry a curse. So morim meorim would be, but they destroy you. Or the Gemara says, and he brings the Gemara Saita, that you have to put in something davar mar betoch hamayim le'mechik Hashem b'seicha. So the halacha was they had to be bitter, and then you could put in. So where the pasuk is talking about that, the hatam is mei hamorim hameorim, the bitter water which is going to destroy you. But once we're past that, then we're talking about these are waters that are destructive waters. It's only where the Torah is trying to, and if you look at it, you'll have a chance to look at it. You'll see that's exactly the way it's passed in the pasuk. So morim hameorim, one would mean the water that has been made bitter, which curse you, and one means the water that curse you bitterly, so to speak, or that are bitter with the curse they carry. So the word morim in one place means the bitter thing you put in, and one place it means the bitterness of simply having the curse on you. And again, there's one other example. This from the Malbim that I love. It says Kolil Tchelis. Let's see if I can find it on a second. It says that the Tchelis has to be. I just want to see if I can. I don't know where it is. Yeah, probably. The Malbim has quite a lot on this, of these things, the Malbim and others, and they're very, very, yeah, let me just read. Okay, this is another one from, it's actually from Limud HaMikra again, from the Sefer. It says, the Gemara says, the Me'il was all Tchelis, like it says, Vayasas HaMe'il HaEphod Klil Tchelis. So this is the second time Klil Tchelis is mentioned. Klil Tchelis is actually mentioned in Tetzav, in the original one. So why didn't the Gemara darshan it from the first time? Why is the Gemara dashing it from Vasisa Vayasas HaMe'il HaEphod Ma'aser Klil Tchelis? Why not in before? It's the same passage, same words, Klil Tchelis. So he says that there are two drushes that the Gemara has about Klil Tchelis. One of them is that the dye has to be totally Tchelis. The dye cannot have Tchelis plus something else. And the second drush, that the Gemara dashes from before, and the second drusha is that the entire beged has to be Tchelis. The word klul means totally. So the word total can be the garment be totally tchelis, or the tchelis be totally tchelis and not off tchelis. If you look at the Taamei HaMikra, it's very different. In Pshat Tetzaveh, it's klil tchelis. The klil is together with the word tchelis, and therefore it's a mercha, which means you read it together. Klil tchelis. So klil tchelis means total tchelis, that the tchelis be total. In Pekude, it's klil with a tipcho, which is a pause. You shall make the me'il totally tchelis. So totally is not describing the tchelis, it's describing the me'il. So the difference between the two is in the tam. And if you think of this thing, I said, I want you to make the me'il totally tchelis. So it means the entire meal. Or I say, I want you to make the me'il totally tchelis, meaning no other dye mixed into the tchelis. So the Gemara dashes both drushes, each one based on the tam in the pasuk. Wow. I think it's extraordinary. I think that it's just eye-opening. It's one of my favorite. It's one of the ones that I'm amazed with.
Fascinating. So I mean that's really goes to the next question I was going to ask, is that can someone appreciate the Sefer even if they're not familiar with Taamim, with Trop, they don't know how to learn, they're not familiar, they don't understand them, or do you have to have some basic understanding to appreciate these different types?
I mean, my hope was when we learned it, I found it is when people you get it. It's not, well, since it's Torah, it is rocket science, but it's not all that difficult to understand, and hopefully very few people enjoy mechanical. Okay, this is a tip, this is a snap, this is a munach, say it like this, like this, like this. Most people rebel at stuff that is not, it has no tam to it, pardon the pun. The Sefer gives you a tam. It all of a sudden it's meaningful, and therefore the pieces are learnable. They're not very big pieces. They're taking. It's all compiled from Sefer. I think I might have one, maybe in the whole Sefer. I went through just compiling it a lot, looking for a lot, and hopefully you get a feel for it from experience. It's very few people learn well from dry rote that is meaningless. Most people like an experience in that. So I'm hopeful that this will give people a tam in Taamim, and people will have the feel for it.
Right. So as I said, that's really the purpose of the Sefer, is to bring out the importance and the beauty of the Taamim that readers can take out of it. Okay, so this is the first part in each parasha, but also you included Onkelos. Yes. Onkelos. So why include something on Onkelos, and how does that section? It's the same, just the Likud?
So Onkelos, it's a Likud. It's over the years. So the first Sefer I used was, I went through, there was a Sefer Tov Yain from Tov Wine, who pointed out it was an old Sefer. It was quite natural. It was it was known Sefer, where he brings out the he does that. He collects the Targumim. He takes all three Targumim, the Targum Yonis, and also, even though Targum Yonis is more of a medrash, so that really wasn't our focus. But he takes the Tam. It's called Yain Atov, from a topi of wine, and I used that as a basis. I took those that I felt were most thicker, and I used what would be most tellus. Over the years, I also included the Matzri, that's Rabbi Yaakov Lev Zechon Livracha, the Mei Yeshiva did an amazing job on it. The Sefer that has become really, so to speak, the encyclopedia and the definitive work is something called Parshegen. Was put out by Rav Zechon Livracha. Unfortunately, in his lifetime, he only did 3 volumes. I believe there's a 4th that sort of was published posthumously. I heard they're working on Dvarim. But he does everything. It's each Sefer is a thick volume, and he has even small minor points. He has different gersos. So it's an incredible work. But I chose the pieces that I feel would give over the most sense of of what the Targum is trying to do. What the Targum is first and foremost doing is, so the Targum means the first meaning. When I say something that's ambiguous in one language, I need to, when I translate it, it gets a certain definitive meaning. The Targum is supposed to be an almost word for a translation, which it is. Aramis is close to Lashon HaKodesh, so it's possible. You couldn't do that in English and in Hebrew, but you can do it in Aramis because it's very close. When the Targum changes a word, it means that the word cannot be taken as literal. It must mean something else, or it has a different sense. Let's give an example. V'chipsu bigdehem. This is this week's parsha. The word v'chipsu it means to launder, to wash. It can have different meanings. It could be for cleanliness. It could be for tumah and tara. Both are used, the kipsu by tumah, and the Targum will differentiate. One of them he's going to call v'chavron, like this means cleanliness. And the problem is over here, in this pasuk, it shouldn't be cleanliness, it should be, and they talk about it. In Rashi himself says in Tazria that wherever the kibbutz is for tara, it's v'yitztaba. And wherever it's for cleaning, it's v'yischava. Chava means white, clean, and the difference is and yet the Targum here, and there's a kasha, something that needs to be, so one type of thing that he does is give us a meaning. What is lenefesh adam? Rashi in the Targum inserts a word here, litmei nafshe nashim. Tmei means bones, because we're talking specifically of the people who carried out some Yosef. The Targum felt it important to insert it. In other places, he doesn't. Also, he does. Here, he does, but other places not. It needs an explanation. And the second thing that is a very important function of Targum is the Targum, and the Rambam Mishnah Torah speaks very, very highly of this function. He was very scared of Hakshama, of people taking Hashem's figurative language concerning HaKadosh Baruch Hu's body, or HaKadosh Baruch Hu's feelings, or HaKadosh Baruch Hu showing himself, and he needed to translate it. It's wrong. The person says HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hands. Yad Hashem is not HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hands. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's action. Eni Hashem is not HaKadosh Baruch Hu's eyes. The right translation of Eni Hashem is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's observation. So and so here, for instance, V'hoyu li halavim means I'll take the Levim. Levim are for me. No, it sounds very Levim. I'll take the Levim for myself. I can use them. He says the Hoyu li means not for my use. It means to me. They will be mishamish and towards me, so to speak.
Right. So these Pshatim on Onkelos here are also a likut, or it's something that you actually wrote? We're writing the Pshatim.
Well, it's hard to say because they are facts. In other words, it's not a chiddush Torah. I was certainly in this order to it. I did go through the Ein HaTov. I don't attribute any of it to any song because they're basically everyone who sees it notices it. And any sefer will have it. There may be some differences in terms of why Onkelos said it. I keep away. What I do is I bring Rashi. What I'll do is I'll translate what that word means in Aramaic, and if Rashi or the Ramban talks about it, I will bring it down. Else, and if the Gemara has a machlokes and it's not like it, or the Gemara is in Pshat, for instance, they say Tagrum Vadata Zokin. The Gemara says Zokin is a shekana chachma and Seva is an old man. He has it. Targum has it the opposite. Unclear why, but so I point out the Gemara, and I leave it at Sarchina, whatever it is. So I believe that a lot of this is common knowledge. We did the best, and people would actually come forth in that and say, you know what, I noticed, as Mavis said, I noticed this. It's interesting, and so some of it people contributed. But Baruch Hashem today, the Ma'at Sari is a very, very beautiful work. Rabbi Yaakov Lev was a Adam Chashiv. Parshegan is an enormous work. It's a reference work. It's hard to he touches on a lot of small nuances in your source. So I don't know what to call it. It's not me or mine in any sense. Where it's anybody's learning it notices these things, and it just I tried to do the best to present it as clearly as possible.
Right. So talking about Onkelos, Yain HaTov, there's a new edition. Matzri is they printed with a chumash in one volume. Nisina Lager, which you didn't mention, I don't know if it's really around. It was redone, but it's not. I don't think it's around really anymore.
Classic. Nisina is a classic, but it's not today. Today, its relevance is as a classic work on it. That's it. There's not, yes.
Right. There's also Art Scroll now has. So there's an English. If people there's an English.
And then you can translate it 3 times over from Hebrew to Aramaic to English and back. That's an amazing. I don't know how many. I mean, I want to. When I was a young boy, we read Mark Twain, and Mark Twain has a satire where he has a story that he wrote, and he said that they translated into French, and people didn't think it was very funny. So he said, "Well, look at how they translated it." So what he does is he takes the French and retranslates the English, with all the with all the clumsiness of some another language, and it's actually very funny. I think that was written. If you translate it from English to from Hebrew to English but it's true. People today, I mean, it's a good thing because people today don't have a clue about Lashon Targum, and we need to translate it. And malasot, we need to.
Right. So as I mentioned, there's Akdama for Encyclopedia or Micropedia Talmudis in here on the Taamim. Then there's the Onkelos, which are compiled from Torah Shlema and others. And then there's the actual Sefer with 2 parts per each parsha. And I should mention the Sefer is about it's almost 500 plus pages, almost 600 pages. But then there's also a very nice bibliography of each Sefer quoted, some basic background of the Sefer when it was printed and about that. I do want to ask, we discussed once before on a podcast, one of our podcast episodes, we did mention Messiah, Mr. Gdilim, Mr. Katana, but there's no Pshat on Messiah in here, right?
Right. I've been tempted to do it. It's a lot of work, and yes, Messiah is another important part that the tzibur should at least understand what it is, not take it for granted. The Gdola Olam, the Ramah of all people, they put their life into it. The Balei Messiah, Ben Asha, and so on. It's something that should be written up and presented the way people should understand. I did have a cheshek once, I haven't gotten around to it, so it's difficult.
Yeah, Mr. Gdilim, Mr. Katana. We mentioned others. I don't know if you want to explain to the listeners what it is, but it just
yes, there's a pattern. It's been crowded out of the Chumash to the point it doesn't exist anymore, because there's so many other things people want to put in. When I was growing up, the big Chumashim all had Mesorah and Mechashai and so on. It's become less and less prevalent. And it's gotten, it's it's relegated further back, and I think it's disappeared. And most contemporary Mikra Gedolos type Chumoshim don't bother with it.
Yeah, it's a real shame because the Baal HaTurim and other Rishonim have Pshatim based on Mesorah. It's like where it tells you how many times in Tanakh it tells you such a thing and similarities, etc. And it's a real shame, or it's written a certain way. It's a shame, especially it was printed old Mikra Gedolos. I won't say where, I won't say who. One of the numerous Gedolos, I asked someone involved, I said, why didn't you put it back in? You did a critical job. No, whatever. But it's not. I don't understand the excuse because it's an integral part of Torah. It's brought down. Gedolei Rishonim have shut them on it. There's no reason that it's not in there. So it's very hard. It is indeed hard to come by today. So okay, but this is mainly focused on Taamim and Onkelos. And I'll put a link in the show's notes that listeners can purchase it. It'll be available widely in the Sefer stores and new Sefer. I want to ask, as we finish, I've always asked about forthcoming publications. I heard the rumblings of the Ben Yeshiva. Other things are being worked on now.
I've tried to put together something, I guess, in the sense that Ben Torah for Life is somebody moving on post yeshiva. I also felt that maybe there would be some tell us of somebody when he's entering yeshiva. I guess Ishkus Havayli Yitzia of having the two, having something, some points. It's been a long journey. I tried to be messiahs a lot with people in the field because they're in the field and they're I also have, I'm also yeshiva, but Holofin, there's a lot of different. So hopefully, I hope it's done, and it's done. I hope it's gone through its fun, and hopefully, the curve it'll be out. Our Messiah is that an Uber you don't buy clothing for, you don't, it's like so. But yes, it's been working quite a long time. I very much felt the need to be messiahs with a lot of people in the field and get a sense of what and how and so on. It's very hard. It's very hard. Every makom has his own nekudas. Every rebbe has his own mahalach, which is the way it should be. And yet there are things that are shavach nefesh that would be appropriate. And so Bez Hashem, hopefully that we'll be able to share that soon.
Okay, and Mirz Hashem, we'll do a podcast. It's funny, we went through a lot of the Sfarim, but not Ben Torah for Life. I guess leave that to the other podcasts, the other interviews. Here we will focus more on the Sfarim. But I can imagine that it's harder to write for yeshiva than Ben Torah for Life. Is people go to the workforce. You go to the workforce. It's almost one, even whatever job you're doing, whatever kind of thing you're doing, you're still Ben Torah in the workforce. In Ben Yeshiva, it's different because every yeshiva, every mahal is different.
Exactly, every yeshiva. In other words, the person moving post yeshiva is betzim not in a makom, whereas somebody going to yeshiva, there's rebbeim who are the people that should be malchim, and I do feel there's a makom, and I wrote to explain why I felt there was a makom to add something to it, to give a certain basis so that it will be easy for rebbeim to discuss things. But and it's very and everyone's so many different. There's so many different types of bachrim. It's not there's no one bachet. So. Hopefully there'll be a Talmud Hashem. I tried very hard to get people who understand and get their Havana and so on.
Okay, so we're looking forward to that. That's a little teaser, but this new Sefer from Mefarish Sechel, very interesting. It's something very different, I think, than what's on the market. So the listeners and readers interested can check it out. I'll put a link in the show's notes. It'll be available in stores. And thank you, Rav Aron, for joining me once again.
Thank you very, very much. And B'Sed Hashem should be Talas Mitzvah.